Welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari, and in this video I am reading a YA dystopian series in 24 hours. This video is going to be about the Uglies trilogy by Scott Westerfield. Before I get into the actual reading vlog, let's do some discussing about this. First off, the process of how I am reading these. I have 24 hours, I set a timer or a stopwatch on my phone, I start it, I read, I have 24 hours to get through all three of these books. Don't worry, it's gonna be well under 24 hours. The 24-hour mark is usually for longer series, but this one only has 3 books. It'll be fairly easy to get through in probably 8 to 10 hours instead of the full 24. I will be talking about all of these books while I'm reading them, and it's going to be huge and spoiler filled going on in here. So if you don't want spoilers, you should probably exit this video right now. My goal with this video series is to find books that we loved as teenagers or as young adults. Books that were really popular through like the 2010s or to like the early 2000s into the 2010s that may have some really problematic content in it that we didn't really notice when we were younger, but go back and see how these stand up. Hint, pretty much none of them stand up, but some are worse than others. Is this series good? Is it worth going back and reading if we want to read it again? This is my personal favorite YA series, so I'm not looking forward to like picking out all of the problematic content in here, but I know there's going to be problematic content. Before I get into the description of this, which I will in 1 minute, let's talk about the rest of this universe. There's this 4th book, Extras. This is set in the same world, follows a completely different main character. I always hated this book, and I don't really just want to read it. It doesn't really fit in with the rest of the story. It's just continuing in the universe. So we're gonna leave this one out because I don't like her. There are some comic books that are also set in this universe. This is the same story as Uglies. It's just told from Shay's perspective in a comic book form, and this is just some sort of like recollection from Tally or something like that. I don't remember, but I'm not going to be adding these because these are just, you know, bonus stories. They're also graphic novels. Additionally, there's a spin-off series called The Imposters. This is set like many years after this events of the Uglies series, and it follows a completely different city, completely different characters, and I'm also not going to read it because we don't care about anybody but Tally in this video. So that out of the way, just these 3 books, not the extended universe. If you want me to like read and review the extended universe, leave it down in the comments below, but probably isn't going to happen unless there's like a lot of people asking for it down there. We're going to start with Uglies. Basically, the plot of this is a utopian future, but we all know it's not really a utopian future. And we're following a young girl named Tally Youngblood who is waiting for her 16th birthday, because on your 16th birthday in this universe, you get a surgery that turns you into a pretty. It's basically plastic surgery that makes you look amazingly beautiful, just like everybody else in the world. So there's no sadness or conflict or anything like that in this world because everybody is equally beautiful. Problematic in and of itself, but the idea is it's supposed to be problematic. We'll get into that later. Anyway, Tally's like the youngest of her friend group, so all of her other friends have become pretties, and then she's left alone as this child little ugly waiting to turn 16. A few months leading up to her birthday, she meets another girl who's been left behind by her friend group named Shay, and then they become fast friends because I think their birthdays either on the same day or very, very close to each other. And the two of them form this quick friendship. Tally's so looking forward to becoming a pretty, but Shay doesn't want to. Shay wants to stay ugly. She thinks something's wrong with this city, wants to escape and go into the wild. And so right before their birthday, Shay runs away, and Tally is kind of arrested by the police and basically told you have to go into the wilds, track down your friend Shay, and bring her back for her pretty surgery, or else you're never going to become pretty. And of course all Tally wants is to become pretty. And then we follow Tally through this adventure hunting down Shay and like warring between getting what she always wanted, which was to become pretty, and betraying her friend, which she obviously doesn't want to do. Let's jump right into Uglies. All right, I've hit the first 100, I'm like 102 pages in to Uglies, and we're gonna talk about it. This book follows a young girl named Tally Youngblood. She is about 3 months away from her 16th birthday, and on her 16th birthday she has like a full body everything surgery that takes her from an ugly to a pretty. So in this universe like ours, based on your age, you're like assigned a different, you know, group, like as a little kid, a teenager, young adult, things like that. In this one, you got littlies, uglies, new pretties, mid pretties, and crumblies. Tally is an ugly, which is just, it's a teenager who hasn't had the surgery. So this surgery basically makes everybody look the same. Supposedly it makes your face shape look more genetically pleasing and innocent. So like bigger doe eyes, symmetrical face, everybody's roughly the same height, and everybody like looks like themselves, just prettier. Obviously this is problematic. Like this is the main thing that people talk about as being problematic, as that just people who look like they normally do are considered ugly, and really shitty nicknames like teenagers give each other, and your goal in life is to be pretty, and that's the point. That's the whole like dystopian part of the society. Well, it's not the whole, but it's the, as far as this book, the first book is concerned, that's the dystopian part of the society. Is she's grown up always knowing that she's ugly and she's going to become pretty. Hey, maybe being pretty isn't all it's cracked up to be, and maybe this isn't a great thing that we should be striving for in our society. Yet here we are. So yeah, that's problematic. It's supposed to be problematic. First 100 pages, we're basically just kind of being introduced to Tally and the world itself. I think Scott Westerfield does a really good job of giving us the information on this universe without like info dumping anything. It all kind of makes sense in what we're seeing. Like Tally's thinking about like this procedure that she's about to go through, so she's very like reflective on her life and everything like that. And then she's also being introduced to new things, and as she's being introduced to these new things by her new friend Shay, we are being introduced to them. I do want to mention that the opening line of this book is like, it's just one of the weirdest opening lines, and I guess it was catchy, but it just feels weird. It is literally, the early summer sky was the color of cat vomit. Like why is that the opening line? But okay, I mean, it does stand out. I'm talking to you about it right now because it stands out so much. First chapter, Tally is sneaking into New Pretty Town because she misses her best friend Paris, and she gets in there and he's like, I don't really want to see you, Tally. He's kind of rude to her, but she is like, oh, he only hates me because I'm ugly and he's pretty. But no, he's kind of just an asshole to her, and I didn't, like, this is the first time that I'm realizing it, but Paris is kind of just not nice to Tally in any of the few conversations that we have with them, or even like her reflecting on like her previous experiences with Paris. He's just kind of an icky guy, not a great best friend. After she's fleeing New Pretty Town, she's kind of been caught where she shouldn't be, and she's trying to run away from the grown-ups before she gets caught. She runs into a girl named Shay, and they find out they have the same birthday and decide that, hey, this last 3 months we're going to become best friends and start hanging out together. So they play pranks on all of the new incoming uglies or new incoming kids, and Shay teaches her how to hoverboard and kind of like sneaks out a lot and explores like the ruins around the city. So this is set in our universe in the future, where all of our buildings and cities have been left in ruin. It explains why later, but I don't remember which book it explains why, but once it gets there I'll talk to you about it. A couple weeks, like 2 weeks before their birthday, Shay is like, I don't want to be pretty. I'm running away, and I'm going to join this group of people who don't want to be pretty, who live out in the wild. And Tally is horrified by this. She's like, absolutely not. The only thing I've ever wanted in my life is to become pretty. And so Shay runs away, leaves clues for Tally to like follow if for some reason she just changes her mind. So Tally can find her, and then she is at the place at the hospital where she's getting her pretty surgery, and literally the last line I read was, "There's something wrong with your surgery, come with me." And so this is going to go into like what the plot of the book is and everything, which is her tracking down Shay, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, that's where we're at so far. No real major complaints. The only realization I'm coming to this time is how much of an asshat Paris is, but he's not really a main character, like ever at all. This man is not really a main character. He's always just like a background friend. So let's figure out. Tally is about to go meet some people who are going to make her chase after Shay, and I am going to keep reading, and I will check in with you maybe around the halfway point. We'll see where I get and what feels like a good stopping point to come back and check in with you. All right, 2 whole hours in, and I'm almost halfway through. So this is probably the last check-in before the end of the book. Shay has left. Shay's gone into the wilderness to survive as an ugly forever, and Talia stayed behind because like her only dream her entire life has been to be a pretty. She has no interest in going out into the wilderness, like ever at all. So when the day of her surgery comes around, a woman named Dr. Cable from Special Circumstances pulls her aside and is like, "Hey, I am going to gaslight and blackmail you, and you will never become a pretty until you tell us where Shay went." And she's like, I don't really know. I can't tell you anything. And so Dr. Cable's like, "Hey, sucks to be you," sends her back to the Uglies dorm, where she's promptly made fun of by all the younger kids because she's supposed to be pretty and she's not. Her parents come and visit her, and they kind of like guilt her about like, "You don't owe this girl anything, don't you want to be a pretty?" And then Paris, her best friend, comes over and he's like, "Tally, what happened? Like, I don't care what it takes, you owe it to me to be a pretty, so just give up this Shay girl." They left Tally a like note on like how to get to the smoke, which is apparently the name of the city, or the name of the ugly town. I don't know how to explain this. And so Tally gives the note to Dr. Cable, and Dr. Cable's like, "Yeah, we already saw your note. You have to physically follow these directions and go find it," because they recognize our pretty faces. They don't really accept us. You got to go out there, and here's this tracker, and you can activate this tracker whenever you get there, and then we'll come arrest everybody. So Tally goes out there. She follows all these directions, almost dies, does this all by herself just because she wants to become a pretty. Like, she misses Shay and she wants to see Shay again, but she thinks she's going out there to rescue Shay. She thinks something bad's gonna happen, and that being pretty is really the only thing that's good in your life. She gets out there and she's like, wow, maybe this isn't so bad. Like, I feel really bad betraying these people who are just trying to live their lives, or just because I want to become pretty. So she kind of puts off doing this tracker, and that's kind of where we're at now. Is she's at the smoke, she's kind of being introduced to everyday life here, and she's warring with herself over whether these people's lives are more important or if her dreams are more important. And so far, these people's lives are winning. Now, at the smoke, and when Shay's conversations earlier, she always talks about this guy named David, and she's trying to meet David. Tally never meets David, nothing like that, but David did this, David that, and you can tell pretty clearly that Shay really only ran away because she has a huge crush on David. Like, she, with her old group of friends who had already left or already became pretty, she like chickened out of running away, but still kind of had a thing for David. And then Tally, like, Tally's friendship and Tally's support kind of encourages Shay to, like, seek out David again. So Shay doesn't really care about being pretty or not. She doesn't really believe in what they're doing, but she's a vapid 16-year-old girl, and she has a crush on this boy, and so she runs away from home because she has a crush on this boy. And when she gets there, or when Tally gets there, it seems like Shay and David are kind of flirting, maybe in like the early stages of a relationship, like brushing up against each other, kind of holding each other's hands, a lot of flirting. And pretty much right from the moment that Tally shows up, David just drops Shay. Just no conversation, just instantly forgets Shay exists and goes right for Tally. And as people who have read these books before, we know where this leads. When you read this book the first time, especially at a young age, you see Shay as the bad guy. And maybe on a reread, you'll be like, maybe Shay has a point in the reason she hates Tally so much going forward in the series, because Tally stole David from Shay. But then you realize as an adult that David's the asshat. Like, this is entirely David's fault. David is not a good person. It's fine that he likes Tally over Shay. He just should have treated Shay better, and she deserved a conversation about that. Or, you know, maybe just don't fall in love with her best friend and, like, leave her for her best friend the literal moment her best friend shows up. Like, you're teenagers. You got plenty of years. You could just be friends with both of them and be cool about it. And then if a relationship sometime in the future manifest with Tally, sure. But literally the day Tally shows up, he drops Shay instantly and is just flirting and obsessed and in love with Tally. And it's gross. And he's a scumbag. So my opinion now is that Shay is not the bad guy. David's the bad guy. Shay's gonna do some really shitty things in the future, but David's the bad guy. The other, like, weird-ish thing that happens is when Tally is spending the 2 or so weeks it takes to get to the smoke from her city, she is given, like, a survival kit. It's basically like what you would take backpacking. In the survival kit, there is 2 weeks worth of dried food. So like food, like the rehydrated packets of food that you kind of just put boiling water on it, it rehydrates and you can eat it and have a nice warm meal. And it turns out that every single one of them is spag bowl. If you are unfamiliar with what spag bowl is, it's spaghetti bolognese. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's spaghetti with meat sauce. So because Tally had to suffer through 3 bags of spag bowl over a 2-week period of time, it's kind of like a meme or a joke throughout this entire series, is always bringing up the spag bowl. So that is also what I'm going to eat, kind of. So I don't have spaghetti, but I have tortellini, and this is tortellini with homemade meat sauce. And by homemade, I mean it's just ground beef with a jar of spaghetti sauce poured on top of it. So anytime I eat in this vlog, it's going to be some form of spag bowl. I have finished Uglies. I am just under 4 hours in, so maybe this will turn into a 12-hour reading vlog. And maybe you already know that, because maybe that's the title of this video. I don't know my life yet. But it's a different day than the last time I talked to you. I ended up getting a really bad migraine, had to stop reading, you know, lay in the dark for a couple hours. Fun times. Let's talk about the end of Uglies. When I last left off, Tally had just arrived at the smoke. She's kind of like meeting new people, and David seems really interested in her. Shay confronts Tally about liking David, and she's like, this guy's my boyfriend, and I don't blame you, because you didn't come here looking for him. You came here for me, but it hurts a lot, right? So Shay has like a real conversation with Tally, and she's like, this hurts. Tally asks if Shay had told David about this, and she's like, I've tried, but he just keeps avoiding me. He only wants to be with you. And Tally's like, man, I feel really bad. Tally's wearing this locket necklace that Dr. Cable gave her, that's like a tracker. And so Shay's like, oh, you met somebody back home, so you don't really like David. And Tally's like, something like that, because she doesn't want to tell Shay that she's there to betray her. So Shay goes off thinking like, hey, Tally's still my best friend. This is kind of the part where Tally's kind of an asshole. Tally knows that Shay is in a relationship with David, and Tally talks to David about it. David is like, oh, Shay's just wishy-washy and just generally talks bad about her, which is gross. But then Tally starts kissing David and making out with him all the time, and it's like, Tally, you're kind of a bad friend too. Like, all three of them are kind of bad for each other, but it's also very accurate for 16-year-olds. Like, David's a 16-year-old boy. He's treating girls like shit because that's what a lot of 16-year-old boys do. Should they do it? No. 16-year-old girls will get a crush on a guy and fight each other about it. Should they really give a shit what guys think about them? Or should you date your best friend's ex-boyfriend who broke up with her to be with you? Probably not, but a lot of 16-year-olds do that. So it's kind of like gross, but also accurate. As Tally's hanging out with David, we find like the big pretty plot twist in here, which is that when you get the surgery to become pretty, they also do something to your brain. They call it brain lesions, but basically what it does is make you like happy and docile, and you're not argumentative, and but you're also not like smart, can't really make decisions easily for yourself. And that's how they say that they fix the world by making everybody pretty, but really they fix the world by making everybody docile. Big plot twist, David's parents were surgeons who used to do these pretty surgeries and then discovered the brain lesions, and that's why they ran away. So Tally figures this out, freaks out, and throws the and throws her tracker into the fire because she's like, oh my god, I don't want to go back, I don't want brain lesions. Throw this away, I'm gonna stay ugly forever. The tracker had a failsafe, and when she threw it in the fire, it went off and alerted special circumstances, and that basically gets us to part 3. Part 3 starts off with special circumstances showing up to the smoke and pretty much capturing everybody. They're going to bring everybody back to the cities that they're from, turn them into brainless pretties, etc., etc. There's a fight, and Tally escapes, runs off into the mountains, and finds David, and so they're the only 2 survivors. Some people die, but mostly everybody's captured, and they're considered survivors of the capture. And they travel back to Tally City because they're going to rescue David's parents and all of Tally's friends before they get their brain lesions. While they're traveling back, David kind of explains to Tally like what happened to our civilization, because we know this is a futuristic dystopian, but what happened to the United States, like what happened to pre-pretty society. And apparently it was like a bug is what they call it. They don't know if it was like a terrorist attack or an accident or what happened, but there is a virus that it's not a human virus, it's a virus that targets petroleum, and it turns petroleum into phosphorus, which then explodes upon contact with the air. So anything like cars, furnaces, stoves, like anything that runs on natural gas, which all of us use, basically exploded and killed most of society, unless you like left the major cities and stayed away from anything that remotely had a gas tank. And then you'd have to learn how to survive on your own. So population was very much dismantled, and then this new pretty society grew up from there. Obviously nothing is run on natural gas anymore because of this. Tally and David get back to the city. They pull an ugly trick is what they call it, and they rescue David's mom, a bunch of their smoke friends, and Shay, but Shay has already been turned pretty. She apparently was first in line for the pretty surgery because she fought back so much. And so she's kind of like a mindless pretty, but she considers herself Tally's best friend, and so she wants to be with Tally. They're hiding out in the outskirts of the city in the rusty ruins. They're talking to like the teenagers, the Uglies, and telling them about the brain lesions, and doing a bunch of pranks and kind of screwing with special circumstances, while David's mom is trying to find a cure. With the help of some like stolen files and stuff, she figures out how to cure the brain lesions, and she comes up with this pill, and they need to test it on a pretty. And so it's like, hey Shay, and she's like, no, I like being pretty. Like, don't screw with my brain. You're telling me that they've already screwed with my brain, but I don't want you to screw with my brain. And she does not give consent. Fortunately, David's mom is a decent human being, and she's like, I'm not going to force test this on somebody who refuses to give consent. Like, she can articulate why she doesn't want it. She makes reasonable arguments. Like, I'm not going to force her. And the solution to this is Tally's like, I'm going to go turn myself in, get the pretty surgery, and you're going to sneak into New Pretty Town and give me these pills. At this point, she also tells David, like, hey, it's my fault that the smoke was overthrown, that your father was killed, because his father was killed after they were captured. And David's like pissed at her, runs away, and then David's mom is like, okay, go turn yourself in. And that's where the book ends, is she goes and turns herself in. So definitely not a standalone book. There's a huge what happens next, but we're not that far in the books yet. So we are moving on to pretties, and we're going to meet up with Tally in New Pretty Town and get all of the ridiculous pretty slang. I love the slang in pretties. It's my favorite part about this book. So I'm really, really excited to read about how bubbly everybody is all of a sudden. Like, oh my god. Pretties is conveniently broken into 3 parts, so I'm going to talk to you about it 3 times. Quick rundown of what's happened so far. Obviously, Tally turned herself in at the end of the last book, and we find her in New Pretty Town being like a ditzy airhead, pretty much. She's going to a party. They do a lot of, you know, drinking, sex, screwing around. She's joined a clique or a gang that that's called the Crims, and they're basically people who did criminal stuff when they were Uglies. So a lot of pranks. Basically what's going on is Tally's memory is fuzzy. She like remembers going to the smoke, but she doesn't really remember the people other than Shay, because she's with Shay every day. She doesn't remember David at all. She doesn't remember turning herself in to find a cure or anything like that. It's like there's some memory, but like the important stuff's fuzzy. And we learn throughout this first part that adrenaline or like strong emotions help clear your head. You're kind of learning that the leader of the Crims has created the Crims to help clear his head, and then the other people are following even though they don't realize that that's why they're following him. So we're gonna see this more later on in the book, but for right now we know adrenaline does it. When they kissing somebody new does it. Heavy doses of caffeine or other stimulants like that. They're at a party. Tally runs into Croy, who is one of the Uglies from the smoke, and he basically tells her to go to this location to find something he's left with her for her, and it's the pills. She and Zane go find these pills. They have to like do a bunch of stuff, climb towers, daredevil stuff in order figure out some clues in order to get access to these pills. And then when they get them, the specials show up, and so Talia is like, she's trying to decide if she's even going to take them in the first place. She's got the note from herself that says, like, you said you wanted to do this, but she's like, I don't know that I want to do this now. Like, I'm a different person. Why didn't David, like, kidnap me like he was supposed to? Like, what's going on with all of this? Last minute, she takes one pill, Zane takes the other pill. This is going to come bite them in the ass later, but that's kind of where we're at. Now, as I said early on in this video, all YA books are in some ways problematic, and I was not looking forward to the reread of this because it's my favorite YA series and I didn't really want to deal with the problematic shit. But while Uglies itself had like a couple of little problematic things, it is nothing like the first part of Pretties. Oh my god. We start off right at the beginning with an eating disorder, basically binging and purging. They eat a shit ton of food, just gorge and gorge and gorge, and then they take calorie purgers, basically, so they don't gain any weight. Like that's problematic in and of itself, but that's just the start. They also frequently use the R word for like mental impairment that we used a lot in the 90s and early 2000s. Frequently say that. Didn't need to read that, thank you. They go to a party first thing in the book, and it's a costume party where everybody's dressing as some sort of criminal. Zane's dressed up as a Nazi. Yeah, that's the hero of this book, the love interest. He's dressed as a Nazi. Zane is anorexic. It's just barely come up, but it's going to come up much more in this book, but he's anorexic. He survives off of pretty much no calories and coffee, and it's often described like how hollow his cheeks are due to his anorexia. Yeah. It also feels like Zane is using Tally. Like, the night that they really meet each other, as far as we're concerned, apparently she's met him before, but never really talked to him one-on-one. She just knows him as the leader of this clique. But pretty much the night that she meets him, the next morning he invites her out to breakfast, and then instantly starts talking like he's been looking for somebody like her, somebody who, like, can resist this pull of prettiness where you always want to be pleasant and bubbly and happy, because he was resisting it through his anorexia, and now he's found Tally and he starts using her as kind of like support. So this relationship is already like really off to a bad foot. He even tells her that kissing somebody new is really how like right after he kisses her for the first time, he basically tells her that kissing somebody new is one of the ways that you stay bubbly, is what they call it. But it's just your mind clears. And so he just keeps kissing her over and over again to apparently get this adrenaline high that clears his mind. Kinda icky. So obviously it doesn't turn out very well for Zane at the end to start using Tally, and if somebody tells you to take 2 pills, there may be a reason for it, but we're going to find that out later on in this book. Now we're going to go through part 2 where their minds are like clearing up, but they're going to do a bunch of dangerous shit like starving themselves to keep their minds all perky. Okay, part 2 of Pretties. This should be a reasonably quick update. I did finish this last night, but then I got tired and I didn't feel like recording, so we're gonna record it today. Sorry that this video is going to be over multiple days. I am doing it within like a 24 hours of reading, but normally I do these videos on weekends and I just can't this time. So it's like the middle of the week, I have to work all day, do, you know, normal everyday things, cook, clean, that kind of stuff, and then find time to read and record this. So while over a 24-hour period, I'm only getting like a couple of hours of actual reading in every day. I'm hoping to just finish it all off today, but there might be one more shirt change. When I last left off, Tally and Zane had just taken the pills, 1 pill each, and we meet up with them again, and they have like cuffs on their wrists now. They've been caught one too many times doing one too many pranks, taking off their rings, and so now they have unremovable cuffs. This is a problem that we're going to see here in just a second. Back into the problematic content with this is, in order to try to remove the cuffs, both Tally and Zane are starving themselves. They think if they lose enough weight, they can just slip the cuff off of their wrist. But basically, Zane's cure seems to take almost instantly. He's constantly able to think for himself. He doesn't get into like the days of being a pretty. He has really, really bad headaches, migraines, just a lot of pain, and Tally's worried that something's gone wrong with his cure. Her cure doesn't seem to work as well, but over time it seems to work. She doesn't have the headaches, but she figures because they only took a half dose each, his dose hit him harder, and that's why he has the headaches, and her dose didn't hit as hard, and so she didn't get as clear-headed as quickly as Zane did. We have a big, like, confrontational scene in this section with Shay, where Shay, like, just accuses Tally of continuously betraying her, lying to her. Shay finds out that Tally took the pills with Zane, and she was like, I'm your best friend. Like, we got in this together. Why would you take the pill with him and not share it with me? Like, I'm sick of you betraying me. So Tally originally betrayed Shay by getting with David when David was Shay's boyfriend. Then she came back to be a pretty much the day she met Zane. She, like, got really, really close with him and started conspiring with him and leaving Shay out again. So Shay feels betrayed. Tally's not really betraying Shay on purpose, but she is betraying her. Like, she's doing what Shay accuses her of. She's just not doing it on purpose. But I can still kind of see why Shay feels betrayed. Like, this friendship was never meant to last. It just doesn't work very well. And this is going to set up Shay as the villain for the end part of this book. Another thing is Shay has decided that she's going to try to cure herself because of Tally's betrayal, and she does that by cutting, like exactly what you think cutting is, where you take a knife and slice your arm. Because that's what the cure seems to be, like extreme emotions, extreme feelings. So kissing somebody, hurting yourself, starving yourself, lots of caffeine, like that's what brings out what they call bubbliness. Showing young kids that, hey, if you go to these extremes, you can control your life. Society is brainwashing you, which it's not really, but in a way to control that is having an eating disorder or cutting yourself. And it's just not... None of these things are good, but they're also not just clearly stated as not good. It's kind of treated like, oh, kids wouldn't actually do this because this is not real life. But as a teenager, I could see reading this and being like, wow, Tally controlled her life and took back ownership of her life by starving herself. Maybe I can apply that to my life and start starving myself, and that's how I get control. Or Shay took back control of her life by cutting herself, creating her own clique where she leads the cutters. Maybe if I cut myself, I will gain the same control that Shay did. It's not telling you to do that, but it's also not telling you not to do that. That's the big problematic thing with this series, is not that everybody wants to be pretty, it's let's not give kids an eating disorder. So at the very end of this section, we have a small group of them escaping. They find a way to get the cuffs off by like sticking their arms in a hot air balloon with like protective gloves on, and that like expands the heat expands the metal and they can pop them off, and then they jump out of the air balloons into like the rusty ruins, and then they're escaping to the new smoke. but we haven't got that far. Like literally at the very end, Tally had just jumped out of the air balloon. 6 hours and 51 minutes in, and I have finished Pretties. I woke the dog up. The end of the last part, Tally and a bunch of friends had kind of like escaped New Pretty Town, whatever the city. Tally is having this conversation with Paris about Paris not wanting to go, and realizes that she's missed her chance to jump, and then she ends up jumping over a river, loses her board because it gets smashed because she's jumping from really, really high, and though she lives through it, the board breaks on her fall. She has like a GPS thing, knows roughly how far away she is from where she's supposed to be, which would be a fairly quick return if she had her hoverboard still, but walking, it's going to take about a week for her to get back. And then this is where it kind of gets weird, because I'm not really sure like why this was in the story to begin with, but she finds herself in what she calls a reservation, and I will let you determine for yourself why using that terminology is pretty shitty. But the whole place is like a giant experiment for the cities, and it's a bunch of people who live under prehistoric conditions. They have no technology, it's supposed to study like human nature and like their warlike ways, and kind of justify why everybody goes through the pretty surgery. So society's not very warlike. I'm gonna kind of skip over the section about human test subjects. Again, like it kind of makes sense. Like one of the characters shows up later, but it's not really my favorite plot line, and it doesn't really make sense with the rest of the story. It's just there. Eventually she ends up escaping, goes back, and she finds David. David brings her to where the escapees are hiding or whatever. While she's going back with David, she has all these like conflicted thoughts about like, but in the first book she was in love with David, then basically forgot about David in the first part of this book and fell in love with Zane, and now she's got like conflicting feelings for David now that she's kind of brought all these memories back, and is she seeing him again, and she's like, I still think I love Zane, and like my time with David was good, but not really what I want now. Like it's not just the surgery, I've changed as a person and I've grown. I'm still in love with Zane. Then she gets to Zane, realizes that he's like super sick, and finds out that the pill that he took was eating his brain. The pills that she was given and split up, they're supposed to be taken as a pair. One of them puts some nanites in your brain that eats away the little scar things, and then the other one kills those nanites, and then she took the pill that basically did nothing but kill nanites, and he took the pill that ate the scar away, or the lesions away, and it just kept going and kept eating more and more of his brain. He's kind of, it was like he was dying, but he's okay. He had a headache earlier in the book, went to the hospital, and then that's when they killed the nanites for him, and then they put a tracker in his tooth. So the specials show up, and Zane can't run away because he's got this tracker, and Tally decides to stay with him, right? So she's like, I've been a pretty before, I can escape again, we'll figure it out once we get this tracker out of Zane's tooth. But then Shay shows up, and Shay's a special now. So, and then Shay's like, no, Tally, you're my best friend. You're gonna be special too. So we know at the end of this book that Tally's going to be forced to go through the special surgery and become a special. And that's basically how this book ends. We're gonna jump into book 3. Unsurprisingly, it's called Specials, and catch up with Tally as a special, and then finish out this series. I forgot to mention that David's mom predicts that Zane is only still alive because he was starving himself. So again, it's glorifying eating disorders, even though they're trying to make some of these things seem bad, saying the only reason he's alive right now is because he was starving himself, is glorifying eating disorders. So a lot of problematic things in this book that didn't really come up in the first book. I mean, it came up a little bit in the first book, but not nearly as much as it came up in this book. So we'll see if Specials continues on this whole problematic bullshit or if it ends up like reverting back to how Uglies was. I love the pretty slang, like bubbly and Taliwa and Shayla and pretty making and just like I love that, and that's like really the only thing I love about this book. I don't like Zane as a character. I don't really like the plot of this book. I don't like the problematic eating disorder and bodily harm shit that's going on in here, and I didn't even understand the entire point of having human experiments that seem to almost mock indigenous people. Why? But yeah, I just like the stupid slang. But Specials is next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. You might be wondering why you're here. It's because I needed an electric kettle, which you're gonna hear boiling in the background during this clip. Why do I need an electric kettle, you ask? For the spag bowl, obviously. So I couldn't find spaghetti bolognese, but I did find spaghetti with meat sauce, which I think counts, and this is like a freeze-dried, I guess, or a, you know, travel meal that needs to be reconstituted. Hikers eat these. I got this at REI. So we're gonna make this and live the true Tally experience. I'm gonna let this finish boiling so you don't have to hear it, and then add it to this bag. All right, I have my bag of deliciously disgusting looking freeze-dried spaghetti. I am going to add the kettle of boiling water to it, which I'm not gonna really do on camera because this is gonna get hot at boiling water, but I will come back to you once this is done preparing. Okie dokie, my delicious freeze-dried spaghetti meal is done. It looks like spaghetti, a little bit cut up spaghetti. I'm trying to show this to you without, you know, dumping it all over the floor, but it smells good. It smells like just like generic spaghetti, maybe school cafeteria spaghetti, not like homemade anything, but also not like gross. How hot is this bag? Okay, I can definitely hold it from the bottom. So let's get a little taste. So this is what it looks like. It's all cut up. There's not like long strings of spaghetti. Italians, turn your eyes away right now. It's okay. It's not great, but it's not bad. Would I eat that if I was starving? Yes. Would I choose to eat that on a daily basis? No. Am I gonna eat it for lunch? Probably, just so it doesn't go to waste. But yeah, I can totally understand why Tally did not want to spag bowl for 3 meals a day for 2 weeks. I would also not want that. I'm done with part 1 of Specials. It's about midnight. I'm gonna go to bed, finish this up tomorrow, but let's talk about it really quick. Beginning of this book, we catch up with Tally about 2 months after the end of the last book, and now she is a special. And basically we go from things being bubbly from the last book to now things are icy. She's part of a new group of specials called Cutters, and yes, they continue to cut themselves. It's really off-putting and gross. But we discussed that with the last book, so I'm not going to go into it again. As the reader, we can tell that Tally is still brainwashed. Everything she says makes logical sense the way she's explaining it, but having read the previous 2 books, we're like, this isn't really how Tally thinks. Some brainwashing going on here, but we can't really figure out what. Now, Tally obviously, as the heroine of a young adult novel series, is not like other girls. She was not like other girls in the past book, where she broke out of her pretty brainwashing thing on her own, and now she's kind of starting to crack the outer surface of being a special. but we're still early in the book, so we haven't gotten to that whole thing yet. We do know Zane's not a special, and at the beginning of the book we don't really know what's happened to him, but eventually Callie and Shay go find him in New Pretty Town. He's a pretty again, but his brain's so messed up the lesions didn't take. There's a bunch of like icky ableist shit in here because Zane can't really walk anymore, can't walk well. He shakes really bad, so a lot of like motor skills have deteriorated because of his brain damage, and Tully thinks it's gross and she wants the old Zane back and blah blah blah, stupid ableist shit, because problematic early 2000s teen books where we're going to make fun of disabled people. It's because stupid reasons. I don't know. I can't explain the horrible thoughts and ideas we had in the early 2000s. I could just tell you about them. Most of this first part is just being introduced to Tully as a special. They're doing their tricks still. Like the new spokes are trying to sneak in these pills and they're trying to stop them, but they're not doing a very good job of it, and they're just, you know, being shitty teenagers for most of it. Some chases and tricks and stuff like that. And then Zane is now trapped. So first they had the rings. Zane didn't wear his ring and then got the bracelets, and now he has like a collar around his neck that's made out of this industrial aircraft material that Tally's bones are made of. So Tally and Shay are trying to free Zane to get him to the new smoke so he could become a special. Apparently you have to free your own brain and do some really cool trick to become a special. So that's kind of what they want to do. They're gonna free him and then follow him is kind of what the plan is. And then they broke into this armory and destroyed a bunch of shit in order to get something that will cut the thing off of his neck. Which is gonna kind of start a war on accident, because society is already falling apart now that not everybody's bubble-headed and pretty anymore, and we're already gonna start breaking into wars because apparently the only way to control humanity is to make everybody bubble-headed. And then this book is just going to prove that that's very true, that the only way to really control humanity and stop wars is to make everybody bubble-headed, because as soon as you remove the bubble-headedness, everybody goes to war. And that's the conclusion of the whole book. And the rest of the series, or in the rest of the books that are outside of this main series, is all about people at war. After Tally freed everybody's brains. But yeah, not a whole lot has gone on so far in this book, but I will pick back up and talk a little bit more about it after the end of part 2. Most of part 2 in specials here is just Tally following a group of crims, including Zane and Paris, as they're running away from their city and going to New Smoke. Tally and Shay do this big break-in, help Zane escape, and then that's just it. She's following them along. Shay has gone ahead because she thinks she could just get to the New Smoke on her own, and then Tally is staying with Zane and the crew just in case. Well, first off, to keep an eye on Zane, and then also in case there's some reason that Tally or that Shay can't actually get to the New Smoke. Most of this part is boring and not really pertinent to the story. She does run into the Andrew Simon Simpson guy from the experimental town in the last book. I still don't think that part was necessary, and even this guy's interaction with Tally in this book could have been done some other way. The only important thing about this section is that just disgusting, just non-stop ableism. Tally can barely look at Zane anymore because he looks disabled. So because of the neurological damage, he shakes a lot, he's weaker, and she is just constantly talking about how she's so disgusted by the sight of him and his weakness. And that's just unnecessarily gross. I completely forgot about this section of the book. Like, I remember the big plot twist at the end, which we'll get to in a minute, but this was just ew. Like, I don't need to read this. It continues the grossness of the story that we've gotten after book 1 was done. Towards the end of this section, Tally arrives in the new city. She's looking for Shay and ends up finding Fausto, who was kidnapped earlier by the New Smokies. He's basically been cured of being a special and tries to like capture Tally and cure her too. Of whatever brain lesions that come with being special. It apparently makes you like focused and angry. Tally is not like other girls, and she escapes, jumps off a cliff, ends up hurting herself really bad, and ends up in custody of the people of this new city. Because what happens is New Smoke is not like a camp in the wild like Old Smoke was. It's an entire like pretty city that just decided that they didn't like the whole idea of the pretty committee anymore, and they're kind of more free, not forcing surgeries. People are allowed to think, argue, whatever. This is Diego, which I have to assume is San Diego, but I don't know. I don't know where any of this place, or I don't know where any of these things take place other than a futuristic United States. So the authorities of the city kind of like take Tally in, and she wakes up in the hospital and finds herself in like a padded room, and basically where they're like, yeah, anybody can have whatever surgeries they want, or they can have the lesions or not. She's a walking weapon, and so they have to disable her. So even though they don't believe in forced surgery, they're going to force Tally into a surgery, and she, doesn't like this very much. So they drug her, and then she wakes up about to have surgery, and then Shay's there to save her. With Shay's help, she escapes, finds out that every single one of the Cutters has now been cured except for her. So except for Tally. They've all been cured of their specials brain lesions, and Shay's like, Tally, we are not going to cure you. We need you like you are because Dr. Cable's here. And then it finds out that Tally's original city, led by Dr. Cable, is here to attack this city and start a war. That's where we are right now, is we're about to go to war between these two cities. And I'm about to finish off the rest of this book. And we come to the end of our journey. It's 10 hours in 4 minutes. I did laps this time, so you saw how much time I spent for each book, which was a little over 3 hours for each. I talked about Tally being like completely disgusted by Zane's disabilities, and she couldn't really like hide the fact that she was disgusted by it. So the first thing Zane did when he got into Diego is go in for surgery, right, to get repairs done to his brain and then like enhance his body to kind of like counteract the physical signs of impairment that he was experiencing. While he's in the hospital is the same time that the city is being attacked. Specifically, Town Hall was being attacked, but the hospital was right next door to Town Hall, and there was a lot of damage to the hospital. And the hospital was under an emergency evacuation. So while Tally and the other Cutters are like, trying to stop this attack, trying to save people's lives, etc., etc. Zane is in the hospital and something has gone wrong. The alarms are all going off, but there's no one left in the hospital to help him because they're all evacuating, and it ends up he dies. Technically, he's brain dead, but they just remove the machine that's breathing for him, and then he passes away. Tally is obviously devastated about the man that she loves dying out of fucking nowhere. This was, when I read this the first time, this plot twist was just like, what? No. And I was so shocked. Like, I did not see this coming at all. But I love it. I love when main characters die. Even before Tally found out that Zane was dead, she and Shay had decided that they're going to go back to their city, which still doesn't have a name, so I'm just going to call it Tally City, and admit to Dr. Cable that they were responsible for the damage done to the armory, which Tally City thinks is an attack from Diego. So, or at least Dr. Cable is using it as an attack from Diego. You see this? He doesn't like it when my door's closed. After the attack and the emotional thing and everything like that, Shay's like, I need to sleep, because she's had the anti-specials serum thing already, so she's just not as strong, so she doesn't have like the mental fortitude that Tally still has. And Tally's like, okay, I will stay here. I was like, I don't need to sleep, but I will wait for you to wake up. And of course Tally doesn't wait. She zooms off, runs away, and goes back by herself, because she's like, I don't need Shay, I can just admit to it myself. Shay doesn't have to be here for this. We get Tally going through the wilderness again on some hoverboards, blah blah blah, no one cares. She gets back to the city, and in the Rusty Ruins she runs into David again. David gives her a speech about how important she is to not only the world but to him. He still holds a flame for her, but it's too soon. Zane's just died. He also gives her a cure for being special, which again is you're just like amped up all the time, you get really mad easily, you're very self-centered and think you're better than everybody. That's the brain thing that it does. Tally shows up into town, confronts Dr. Cable, and Dr. Cable's like, yeah, I know that it was you and Shay, but I really hate Diego. I've been looking for an excuse to overthrow Diego for years and years and years, and you have just handed this to me on a silver platter. And then Tally and Dr. Cable fight. Tally ends up stabbing her with the cure for specials, because Dr. Cable is the special too, and then Tally gets put into a jail. We know that while Tally's like in this cell and everything like that, like a couple weeks pass, nothing's really going on, but she finds out because Dr. Cable's been cured, she loses her position, she becomes just like a normal human being. Oh my god, the worst thing in the world. And then Tally is the last special in existence, and she's being pulled into a surgery to remove her specialness and everything like that. And obviously she doesn't want this, but people don't seem to give Tally a choice on what she wants or what she doesn't want. And then as she's going into surgery, she realizes that somebody is there trying to rescue her. She thinks it's David or Shay, because David had been outside in the ruins. He may have called Shay and been like, hey, come help me rescue Tally, whatever. Turns out it's Dr. Cable. Dr. Cable's like, you were the last of my cutters. Like, I created you. You're a nearly extinct species, and even though I am now just a normal human, I want my work to live on in you, and I think we might need you as a special in the future. So then she flees, goes, meets up with David, and then the book ends with Tally's manifesto, where she's basically like, David and I are out here watching everybody in the world, and we're gonna make sure that no one returns to their rusty ways. So no overpopulation, no wars, no destroying the planet, all of those things. Like, she's still special and she's watching you. And that's how the book ends. It sets up for extras, but extras is literally the stupidest book ever, and I don't want to read it. This is the end of this video. Thank you for being here for my reread and deep discussion of the Uglies series by Scott Westerfield. If you made it to the end of this video, there is already a poll up on my YouTube channel where you can vote for the next YA dystopian series that I read, and we can talk about how problematic another series is. I will see you all in the next video. Bye!